Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar with INSOC and MAP Cybersecure on SSAE 19 cybersecurity certification for MSPs. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's meeting. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would like to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. To ask questions today, you're muted by default. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and we can address them while we're presenting, or we can do them in the Q&A session at the end. So today's session is going to be run by our CEO, Eric Rockwell, and we've also got our guest presenters, James Warwick and Sam Sheff from Strategic Technology Solutions, and Kevin Holmes, who's our Assurance and Practice Leader at MAP Cybersecure and Martini at Provi Partners. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to Eric to kick off today's session.
Well, thank you, Anna, and Kevin, James, and Sam. Thank you guys for being here today. Always a pleasure to chat with you guys.
Thank you, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, good stuff. So, James and Sam, I want to talk for a minute just about your MSP practice. Where are you guys from, and how long have you guys been in business?
Yeah, I'll kick that off. So, Sam and I have had the pleasure of starting Strategic Technology Solutions. I'll say STS for short. STS for we're just a little bit over 5 years now. Sam and I worked together previously, though, for about 10 years before that at another IT firm. So, you know, we've had an enjoyable time building STS over the years. We're based in Southern California, Torrance to be specific, as our headquarters, and we have an MSP that is focused on the professional services industry, but most of our clients fall into the legal vertical. So we have, I would say today, roughly well over 80% of our clients are in the legal vertical.
So why did you guys select the legal vertical? Was it because when you were trying to get clients, you were in the very back of the line?
Yeah, you know, we've been in the, you know, we've been in that struggle. Yeah, no kidding. You know, it's one of those industries that once you're in it, you're in it, and you know, it can be great because of, you know, the closeness of the industry, and you know, it seems everyone knows everyone in legal, and you know, that's what we've been focused on for the better part of 15 plus years now. And you know, the nice part, especially what we've just went through, you know, better part of 6 months of COVID this year, one thing we really found out that is law firms are very resilient, and thank God we've had very minimal impact throughout the past 6 months. And you know, the sentiment across the board has been kind of similar, that, you know, a lot of our law firm clients are either they had really little impact or they're doing better than ever. So it certainly played to our favor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and James, the accounting profession tracks similarly as well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
They tend to go hand in hand.
I was going to say, one thing that's great about both professions is that they're very dependent on revenue from hourly billing. So anytime they're not able to work, like because of a technology problem or a cyber attack, then that ends up cut directly from their bottom line. So that is definitely an advantage, I'm sure. I noticed that you guys have a secure cloud service on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Sam, do you want to grab that one, or?
Sure. Yeah, I'll open it up. So STS about 3 years ago decided to play in the cloud arena, but our interests were not about going with Azure or AWS. We experienced AWS at our previous firm, and really didn't like what we were able to do with it. At the end of the day, we wanted to design a cloud service that was built around our clients, not one that was built around the masses. So STS Cloud came into play, spent about a year developing it. Of course, when it comes to something that is as public as a cloud can be, we have to lock it down. So that's where the secure part came into play. And that's when we introduced ourselves to Eric as a MSP that was looking for security services.
That's awesome. So I want to go through a couple of reasons why we believe that MSPs should have a third-party cybersecurity certification. And James and Sam, I definitely want to hear it directly from you guys, because you've been through this journey, you're going through this journey, you're getting assessed. So I want to hear it directly from you guys. Part of what we've noticed over the last few years is that the threat landscape has been increasing. The number of attacks has been increasing. The number of successful breaches has been skyrocketing. The amount of money that cyber criminals have been able to steal is skyrocketing. Just a few years ago, it was in the hundreds of billions. Now we're expecting it to be next year in 2021. And cyber criminals have stolen more than any organized crime in history just over the last couple of years. It's just out of control. And we believe that this represents either a major threat to MSPs or a major opportunity for MSPs. So, Sam, why would this be a threat to MSPs?
Well, we hold the keys to the castle. Every one of our clients, passwords, accounts, whatever it might be, we have it somewhere.
Right. And if a cyber criminal breaks into your secure cloud, that probably isn't good for PR, and I'm sure word spreads fast around town, right?
Especially in our vertical.
So, James, alternatively, how is this an opportunity for MSPs?
Well, yeah, it's a competitive advantage, absolutely. You know, what I find most interesting is, you know, I go out and meet with business owners and potential prospects. You know, it's interesting because more so than not, I don't hear those business owners and or whomever we're speaking with really bring up the topic on, well, how are you protecting our data? So from my perspective, it's something that we can bring awareness around and help them understand, whether it's us or not. You know, you should be asking the question, how is your MSP protecting your data? I'm sure, you know, if they have an MSP today, or if they're looking at another MSP, I'm sure that MSP is preaching, you know, greater security controls. But are they talking about what they're doing internally to protect their clients' data? And so we're exposing that, as a competitive advantage, but we also want to bring that awareness up so they really start asking that question.
Exactly.
Yeah, James, this is Kevin. Let me jump in real quick. In particular, with professional services firms, the amount of sensitive data that is processed by law firms, accounting firms, and other professional services firms is monumental, and the damage could be very severe if that data gets out. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. I believe, just to cap off that sentiment, is I just believe that as an MSP, and we know the controls are getting pushed down. We know that the governance on this is going to be stronger going forward. But as a business owner, I just think we have an ethical responsibility to protect our clients' information.
Right. But something you said earlier, I think, is really powerful, James. You're shedding a light on this, and you're asking these prospects how your competitors can prove it. How can they prove that they can keep your information safe, or that they are? And if they don't have a certification, it's pretty hard to do that, because it's all based on trust and talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Proof's in the pudding, right?
I also want to skip ahead here to something else that you said. I heard you mention something about your clients getting questions from their clients. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, so, in the legal world, they work for a lot of larger corporations, high-profile businesses, and these businesses, more so than ever are pushing down, regulatory audits, making sure that the law firms are in compliance with what these bigger corporations are requiring, and that's something that we have seen, especially over the last couple of years, increase greatly, where, before maybe we got an audit. One of our law firm clients maybe would get an audit every now and then, and now we're seeing some of them getting, audited more than multiple times per year.
Right. Yeah, I think I've seen some of our mutual clients starting to get audited every month.
Yep. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that for a moment. So one thing that we've noticed, James, is that the larger clients that your clients have that are auditing your clients, they don't just get up in the morning one day and say, hey, who's the smartest security wizard here? Hey, what should we do to audit our clients, right? They're not just making it up and winging it. They're all following a commonly recognized framework. And there are two frameworks that they're pulling from, which are very similar: the National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework, or the International Standards Organization. And both of these frameworks map back together. The NIST CSS is a little bit more modern. And what we typically see is that they pull from the top 20 critical security controls from both of these frameworks, and they use those control questions to ask how these law firms are keeping their information safe. Would you agree with that, James and Sam?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Almost word for word sometimes.
Exactly. So it's not like we have to figure out how to meet different requirements for different companies. They're all largely the same. And if we look at this coverage map, we can see different frameworks, and these are not regulations, by the way. These are frameworks, and what we can see is how they map to security maturity levels. So if we look at the types of questions that your clients get, James, a lot of them are somewhere in between the NIST low baseline and the CIS top 20, which we see between about a security maturity level 2.5 and 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what they do is they measure the level of sensitive information that they're giving to your clients, and then they establish a set of questions at the low baseline, a moderate baseline, or in some cases even a high baseline if they're working with city, state, and local governments, or companies that work with the Department of Defense, for example. So what we are doing at your firm is taking the top 20 critical security controls that are defined by the Center for Internet Security that come from these frameworks and applying them to your MSP practice and your cloud and your specific tools, and demonstrating through annual certification reports that you have properly implemented these controls and can keep your clients safe from a reasonable cyber attack.
Yep.
And the cool thing about implementing these controls in your MSP is that we're then able to implement these controls for your clients, which is exactly what a lot of them are asking for. So I want to talk for a minute about these security maturity levels and how they relate to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So there's 5 different security maturity levels, 6 if we include 0 as a starting point. And at these different levels, you have established more or less policy. The policy that you have is either formally written and you've trained your team on it, or it's informal. The process is either formal and measured or ad hoc. Sam, give us an example of something that that's been formalized in your firm now that was maybe ad hoc a year or 2 ago.
Well, the top thing, a security policy.
Right.
Everyone always talks about doing some sort of security within the firm, but not having it written down, not having it distributed along your
right.
staff. Everyone's just doing whatever they want to do.
And that's not really a policy. It's not really governance unless you can measure it and enforce it, right?
Exactly. Once you have it in place, then you put all the controls in place.
And
Eric,
technology can be used. Yeah, go for it, Kevin.
Oh, Eric, I was going to ask if I can jump in and pose a question to James and Sam on this. Is you've got people, process, and technology. And in my internal control travels, I found that, the technology part isn't necessarily too challenging. The process part can be more challenging. And the people part can be very, very challenging because it's change management and embedding awareness and activities into a governance structure. So I just wanted to hear both of you comment on your experience with that.
I can say from the technology side of things, from the service delivery folks, it wasn't that difficult to implement some of these controls because they were already sort of thinking about it in the back of their head. When we started to lock things down, when we noticed, hey, I realized I was using this, or we need this to perform this type of work at a client.
Right.
So it really was just a change of mind.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that. I think just from the firms that we do work with, and it is challenging the mindset, of changing people's mindset, because no one wants to do more. I mean, we still have people that push back on 2-factor authentication, and just because it's one extra step. And I know that's just a small example, but having a well outlined and well defined plan in place that visually shows them, what the result is, I think goes a long ways. And they start to get an understanding and the buy-in on why we need to do this, the value of doing this, and how it will protect their business. Because at a certain point, they have to do it. They have to do something, or they're going to get breached, or they're going to get compromised. So it's really that shift in mindset of, before it was, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Or you don't need to do anything. But today it's, one compromise could put them out of business, and they really need to understand
Exactly.
that.
Well, what's scary too is if we go back to those questionnaires, some of these companies that you guys work with, if they're working for prime military contractors like Raytheon or Lockheed, they're getting questionnaires that are trying to measure them to a security maturity level 4, because these companies might be exchanging controlled information with these law firms. So they have to make sure now that these lawyers that have made a career out of confidentiality can actually keep their electronic information safe. And some of them, like insurance companies, are trying to hold them to a level 3 standard, which is defined where you have organization-wide process and policies in place, but there's minimal verification. And surprisingly, guess what the national average was last year? In the US, it was a 1.5, and I can tell you that most of the MSPs that we've assessed over the years are at a 0.75, and a lot of the law firms and professional services firms that we've all assessed together have been at a 0.5. So no formal security program in place. Everything was ad hoc, unstaffed, and uncoordinated. And despite security issues, no formal controls actually existed. Would you guys all agree with that?
Yeah, yep.
The part of what we're trying to do for MSPs is give them a third-party certification that their clients and their clients' clients are actually asking for that proves that they can keep their information safe. So one of the advantages of what we're doing is that these SSAE certifications are literally what is written on all of the questionnaires that your clients get. The first thing that they ask for is, does your firm have an SSAE report? If you're outsourcing your IT, do they have an SSAE report? People are actually asking for this. And in some cases, they'll say, do you have an SSAE or ISO certification? But they're asking for one or the other. They're not asking for a certification from a software or tool company. They're asking for a truly independent certification. And first of all, James and Sam, would you guys agree with that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
And second of all, Kevin, why would they be asking for an AICPA certification as opposed to a certification from somebody else like a technology company like Cisco?
Yeah, Eric, that's a great point and a great question that needs to be answered for our audience. The AICPA, for those of you that don't know, stands for the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And the accounting profession for generations has been providing assurance that's withstood the scrutiny of the marketplace on financial state information for, like I said, for generations. And so as cyber risk began to grow, the AICPA aggressively positioned the accounting profession to provide assurance on information security controls, primarily because that's what accountants or CPAs are in the business of doing, is providing assurance on information, because there's an established marketplace acceptance for the integrity and credibility of the profession. So other information security entities and information technology entities don't necessarily have that same marketplace acceptance, which is why AICPA certified firms are desirable for the certification. And so MAP Cybersecure, the firm that I'm representing, is actually an accounting firm. It's an affiliate of a more traditional accounting firm, which is Martini Octobi Partners, but MAP Cybersecure is a separate legal accounting firm providing these certifications.
That's awesome. And that's why all of these questionnaires that we're seeing actually ask for an SSAE report. They are looking for an independent auditor's assessment of the environment, and they're not asking for us to make up our own bag of tricks. They're specifically asking control questions that come from these established frameworks, NIST and ISO, and most of them have been prioritizing the questions based on the Center for Internet Security's top 20 critical security controls, which, if properly implemented, would have prevented 98% of all reported breaches over the last few years. So it's highly relevant, it's highly effective. That's why they're doing it. one question that we've been getting a lot from MSPs is if they can get CMMC certified, and this is causing a little bit of confusion in the marketplace. CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and this is a certification that is specific to defense contractors. And this certification shows that you can handle controlled unclassified information, which is information that the Department of Defense is controlling. It's not classified at a secret level, but it's still controlled. And most MSPs are not handling this type of information. Your clients might be. So the MSP doesn't need to get a CMMC certification. The MSP needs to get a NIST-based certification, and that's what we're offering here. It shows that you can work with a company that has controlled information, but it's an appropriate certification for a service provider. And James and Sam, at the end of the day, you guys are a service provider, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about what these reports look like. These reports go into detail on how you've implemented the critical security controls in your MSP. And I'll talk a little bit about the 20 different security controls if we have time. We've done a lot of webinars on that in the past. But the report gives you a security maturity rating on a 0 to 5 scale, and it measures how many of these controls are in written and approved policies that you've been trained on, how many of the top most important controls are implemented in the top 5, how many controls are implemented across the board and automated, and how many are measured in a formal review. So let's talk about that for a moment. What does it mean to have a control implemented versus automated, Sam? Can't you just do something once and hope for the best and never look at it again?
If that was the case, we would all live happier lives. I think it really just comes down to when you're looking at something, that it's not the last time you look at it. You have to continue to look at whatever this control might be, whether it be weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. It needs to be looked at, right, reviewed, approved, and so forth.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen is that even with MSPs that have change management in place, people make mistakes. And somebody really smart might open an insecure port because they're trying to fix something.
Great example.
Another example that comes to mind with some of our mutual clients, Sam, sometimes they have an internal IT person, and what happens if that internal IT person maybe boots up an old Exchange server for some reason to find something and forgets to turn it off? What kind of risk does that pose?
Yeah, and without having something in the environment to notify us on, that could be a honeypot for a very long time.
Exactly. So in that example, the policy lets us govern what we can and can't do. So that way we can hold each other accountable, whether it's ourselves or the client, and we can measure on an ongoing basis whether or not the controls are in place. And we can report on that to senior leadership and look at the failures that we've had along the way to make improvements and get better. One thing I like also is that the report goes into detail on how you've implemented the critical security controls in your MSP, whether or not you actually did it correctly based on a test procedure. And one of the cool things is that every tool that you use goes into your audit report. So it shows your clients that you're not just winging it and changing tools every 5 minutes. You have a process, you're following it, you're only using qualified tools, and you get audited on them on an ongoing basis. And one thing I think we've seen with some of these other lower maturity MSPs, Sam, is that they just kind of switch tools and standards every 5 minutes based on some shiny new thing, and that does not produce a consistent result. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree to that.
I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about what life looks like at a higher maturity MSP. So at a security maturity level 4, you're conducting an annual risk assessment, not just a risk assessment on things like vulnerabilities, but you're looking at all of your tools and assessing the potential impact if those tools or systems were breached, like your configuration management database, or where you keep your passwords, and the probability of a breach. So something like your RMM system, Sam, that might be a really high impact, but it's a very low probability because these controls are in place, tested, and functional. You're also looking at vulnerabilities. Sam, tell us what these are.
Let's see, which one am I looking at here? Let's see. The executive summary. I get to look at those once a week. They generally are what our findings within the environment in regards to maybe a CVE that came out, or someone opened a port and we don't know about it. So we get to these executive summaries telling us, hey, look at this. What's going on here?
So in your technical opinion, what is the value in looking at that risk on a weekly basis?
Well, it's all about being proactive, right? When we talk about being an MSP, we say we are doing proactive measures. So this would be one of them. Why don't get in front of it before you have a breach?
Right. What if one of your new guys accidentally opens up remote desktop on a firewall and you didn't know about it?
And how would you know? You're not micromanaging your team. So this is the only way you can surely find out what is going on, having the visibility into your environment.
Exactly. So at an SML4 MSP, you're conducting these annual risk assessments, and every year you're moving stuff that is a high risk into a lower risk category, and you do that over time. You look at vulnerability reduction over time. You have written security policies that define the rules. This way, you don't have to argue with people about who's right or wrong. The policy defines right and wrong, and it goes into detail on things like password management. How often should your passwords change? Do you require multi-factor authentication? When is MFA actually required? What are your mobile computing and work at home policies? How are you allowed to securely exchange information? So at some of our higher maturity MSPs, they started off in a place where everybody was exchanging information different ways. Some people would email it, some people wouldn't encrypt it, some people would not use the system that the firm thought they were supposed to be using. And now at a higher maturity MSP, everybody's been trained on your authorized method of remote access, how to properly transmit information securely, that the only authorized file sharing system is maybe OneDrive with SharePoint because that's protected by Azure AD. And every year you look at policy violations and revise the policies based on what's unique to your MSP and changes in the threat landscape and changes in the cybersecurity framework. And one of the cool things is that we don't have to make it all up on our own. We can look at new NIST publications and things that have come out in the last year for guidance. There's annual training, so that way everybody on your team knows what your policy is and what is right and wrong. They know how to report a security incident. They know how to fill out a change control correctly and get approval on a change. They conduct a weekly access review meeting. So Sam, tell us about this. What are we looking at here?
We get the luxury of seeing any authentications that happen outside of our normal areas. We get to see if our firewalls perimeters are being scanned. We get to see and react to security protocol breaches like this ahead of time.
Right. So if you don't have anybody, let's say, working from South America, and you have a successful login from South America, that could be an indication of compromise. And a lot of regulations that have data security requirements, part of what they require is that you're conducting these access review meetings on a regular basis to see where people are logging in from and look for abnormalities, like somebody logging in where they weren't. You're conducting a monthly risk management meeting where you're looking at vulnerabilities and also indications of attack. This screenshot right here is from a real MSP's lab tech server, not SPS, but a different one. And they actually had port 80 open on their lab tech server. Their logins to lab tech were unencrypted, and there was a cyber criminal in South Korea launching 1.5 million DDoS attacks a day on this lab tech server, and they didn't know. That was why it was always running slow.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And James, as the CEO, you're not involved in all of the day-to-day stuff, but you have an eye on security, and you participate in policy decisions and these quarterly security committee meetings. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. This to me, and I think the word was just mentioned, is visibility and understanding of, where you're headed in the security realm, what becomes important to the organization, how we shape and form decisions based around security policies. I think it all comes into play, but for me, most importantly, it's that visibility and understanding, because as we all know, assumptions will just get you into trouble. And having these well-defined, well thought out, well mapped initiatives and committee meetings, it really sheds a lot of light and helps us steer the ship, quite honestly.
Right. That's awesome. And I know you guys have been growing and scaling. Does this give you any peace of mind as you're adding new team members that you maybe haven't built a trusted relationship with?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, absolutely. We all know trust is earned, but again, if we don't have these controls and policies in place, it goes back to that same sentiment of, what you can't see, you may not know. And, it's peace of mind, but I think it also goes back to that client or prospect conversation of, hey, this is how we control new employees, right? We don't just give them the keys to the castle. We know what they're doing and we know what's going on.
That is awesome.
It actually makes onboarding a little easier too, just because now we're saying, hey, This is what you have to follow. At the end of the day, it makes things quicker. Here's your document. Here's your run book.
Yep. That's awesome. James, tell us a little bit more about how you've been having those conversations with prospects and what has and has not been effective.
Yeah, the conversation goes back to the awareness, and we all want our clients to spend more on technology. We all want our clients to spend more on security, but how can we push that when we're not doing that ourselves? So first, it starts with us and the investment that we make into our MSP to protect our clients' information. And there's a larger conversation that needs to be happening around that, and quite honestly, it just doesn't happen enough. So again, I really try to expose and drive that conversation, and this is where this program becomes a differentiator in our industry, because quite honestly, not a lot of MSPs are doing this out there, and it's an easier conversation to have. It shines the light on the importance of why MSPs need to be doing this. And when we get to a point of, wanting our clients to implement greater security controls, well, we're doing it as well. And why are we doing it, right? So it all drives to that awareness, that visibility, and the value of doing this.
Right. And you guys can actually demonstrate your security maturity level and prove it. And I'm sure that, actually, let me ask you this, James. How often do you come across other MSPs that actually have a certification?
Almost zero. I don't think whether they didn't know off the top of their head or not, but I ask the question all the time now, and I have never got a definitive, oh yes, our MSP has a cybersecurity certification.
Wow. And,
to kind of wrap that all that up into, and this might be a little bit later on, but, I certainly feel that, in our industry and doing this as an MSP, we're able to demand a higher per seat price.
Right. Well, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. These things aren't free, and it requires people, process, and technology to actually have a good level of cyber hygiene. But this is a way to demonstrate why your seat price is higher. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think, and Sam would probably agree with this, but it helps us sleep a little better at night, or a lot better, knowing that we are doing the right thing, and this is what we should be doing as an MSP. But that's also an easy conversation with a prospect. I mean, do you want to work with a MSP that values IT security and is also practicing and implementing what they're preaching, or do you want to deal with one that doesn't?
Right. Yep, good point. Sam, were you going to say something also?
I was just going to say I sleep really well now. No, it really comes down to having everyone buy in. All of management needs to buy in, and then when they do that, it's easy to formulate a plan around providing security not only internally but to your clients. If everyone is security focused, it shows. And having conversations with clients, whether they're prospects or their current clients, it's really easy to talk about security when everyone's involved in it.
And how have the conversations with your technical team changed over the years as you've implemented these critical security controls in your MSP?
I will say it's been a lot easier than I thought it would be. I feel like the team as a whole understands that security is becoming almost a primary focus in technology today. So with that said, a lot of them have already been talking about and/or trying to pursue something in security as far as certification in that, maybe the CISSP or Security Plus, or even just wanting to become just more security focused.
Right. Well, along those lines, I want to talk a little bit about the journey that you guys have been on and how you actually get to a point of being audit ready, being certified. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you guys have gone through, Sam, to implement the technical side of these critical security controls, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
All right. Well, it all starts with policy. So once you have this policy in place, once you've created it, once you have buy-in, and you start implementing these controls, we've been able to get through our controls pretty quickly because of the way they've been formatted from you guys and from Jeff, who's the CIO at Innova. His implementation plan has made it very simple for us to get through these CSCs, these controls, and do them in a timely manner. We were very aggressive on our timeline, wanting it to be done by the end of the year. Of course, as soon as we started, COVID started, so it's been a little bit tricky, but the plan is in place. And once we go through these, as you can see on the screen here, once we go through these weekly management meetings, we figure out what controls we need to get implemented for the week, for the month, for the quarter. We figure out if we're missing something, we need software, we need to get licensing, whatever it might be. We have time to do that and to get that implemented. But at the end of the day, it's taking these controls and putting them into the environment. So with that said, there's the hardening scripts is a great one. The hardening scripts, meaning your Windows 10 and your Server 2016 server environment out there, you have GPOs in place that will lock down and disable certain protocols that the servers have enabled by default. Microsoft is known for just letting it be loose, and we've all been hit by some sort of malware, whether it be a client or not. These hardening scripts implemented properly will basically alleviate that kind of breach. So the GPOs do come from CIS, so they're not just something we made up that we're like wanting to implement because Joe Schmo said it. No, CIS has developed these GPOs, and you get to deploy them very quickly into your environment.
Yep. And what you're talking about is...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, James.
Oh, no. I was just going to add one more thing. Yeah, just it doesn't only hit up your Windows 10 up, in your server environment, but it also talks to your Office 365 environment if you have that. The hardening is across the board. VMware, Windows, everything.
AWS, all of the above. I was just going to mention that the term hardening is the most secure but still usable configuration standard for any piece of technology. It can be AWS, Azure, or Office 365. It can be Windows 10. It could be a firewall router or switch. But one of the advantages that we have is that all of these things have a hardening benchmark, and we're able to follow them to protect them and sleep at night, as you said.
Yeah, and having a partner like you guys have made it very easy to get through this 1,000-page benchmark document.
Remind me to give you $20 for saying that. No, just kidding. That's awesome. I do want to briefly go over the controls because we didn't really go into them at a lower level. The identification is all about policy and understanding where your data actually is, mapping out where your data is allowed to be stored. So this is your only RMM tool, this is your only PSA, this is your only authorized method of remote access or transmitting files, this is your only configuration management database, and you can't store passwords in the PSA because that's not allowed. That's part of your policy. That's your governance. And once you have that defined, you can conduct risk assessments and create a risk management strategy based on your unique MSP's business environment. And that's the first step. The next step is implementing the protection controls like the asset hardening that Sam was just talking about. Implementing policy and awareness training across the board, creating an access control procedure so that people can't just randomly email tickets in asking for new user accounts. They have to go through an approval process, and they have to be validated before passwords are reset or new accounts are created. And you have some proactive technology in place, like Sam was talking about, that automatically reconfigures insecure settings. Not that we've defined, but that the Center for Internet Security has defined. And you can detect anomalous events like those people logging in from South America when you guys don't have any employees in South America yet, right? And conducting regular response and recovery testing instead of doing it for real. All these controls are designed to prevent those incidents, but we still want to plan for them and train for them just in case, right?
Nothing is 100%.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about was budgeting for these certifications. The lower level certifications based on what's called Implementation Group 1, that's the bare minimum, and those certifications are only $12,000 to $24,000 annually, depending on how much help we're giving on the control implementation. The higher security maturity levels are between $50,000 and up, depending on how many times a year we're coming back in and recertifying. So some of these are annual. Some of these might just be a moment in time, like 90 days. We prefer the annual schedule. Some of these could be quarterly, and that's the higher level stock for cybersecurity. That means that we're constantly coming back in and validating that the controls are in place, tested, and functional, and policy driven. But even at $24,000, these are things that MSPs can easily budget for and achieve. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be looked at as an investment into your business, not an expense, as we preach to our clients, because the ROI will be way more significant than the expense or the investment of this amount.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, it's the right thing to do given the business and the industry that we're in. It's like if we were to go open a hot dog stand tomorrow and we didn't take care of the food and we left it out in the sun all day and started making people sick, that wouldn't be the right thing to do either, even though we're feeding people.
No, definitely not. It needs to be viewed as a discipline, and it needs to be, it's a mindset change. It's an ongoing program. It's never ending, but it's just, it's that sentiment of you don't go to the gym one day a year and then you're fit for the rest of the year. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
That'd be nice. Where can you send me the address of that gym?
Right.
All right. Well, I wanted to open it back up for questions. We've got a real audit and assurance leader on the phone, a couple of real MSP executives, and Hannah, I think we've had some questions from the group.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So we do have a global audience on the phone, and one of the questions from some of our UK viewers is, how relevant is SSAE 19 to the UK or European region, or how can it be translated to be valid in that region?
It's actually highly relevant, partly because the Center for Internet Security's top 20 critical security controls come from both NIST and ISO. And we've actually been getting inquiries from not only the UK, the EU, and Canada for SSAE certifications, but a lot of the larger enterprise customers and Fortune 1000 companies that are driving these requirements down, they're asking for an SSAE or ISO report, one or the other. So because the critical security controls map back to both frameworks, we're able to demonstrate things from ISO that are important in some industries, but also things that might be a little bit more modern that are highly relevant now.
Yeah, Eric, can I address that from the accounting firm side as well?
Absolutely.
So in the accounting profession, you have American standards and other country standards and international standards. And what's been happening over the last at least 10 years is the U.S. standards have been converging with international standards because the world is shrinking and companies are multinational, and the U.S. and international accounting standard setters have been converging the standards so there's a level of consistency. So now I can say for sure I have not done any investigation on an equivalence of an international reporting standard for an SSAE 19 engagement. However, I'm sure something like that does exist. You know, in the UK, they're chartered accountants rather than certified public accountants. And I'm willing to follow up on that question if the asker of the question wants to send me an email. Eric, our email address is going to be provided?
Absolutely. You want to take that on, Miss Hannah, and we'll get them in contact with Mr. Kevin?
Yes, of course, no problem at all. I'll collect the email address and I'll put you in contact, Kevin.
Yeah, what I can do is my firm's a member of an international network, so I could reach out to a UK firm and get that question answered probably pretty quickly.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know that we're coming up to time. I just have one other question, which I think might be good for James and Sam as well. So if you go into the process or you can see on average you are hitting the 1.5 SML rating as an average MSP, how long does it take you to be able to get to an acceptable level, whether that's a level 3 or a level 4 as you are now?
Maybe I'll start with this one. It really just depends on how much you are willing to take on. So for our goals for this year was to get it done by the end of the year. We started in March. We really actually started probably in May after COVID slowed down. We were able to figure out what's going on. But at the end of the day, it could take you 8 months. It could take you a year. It really just depends on what you're willing to buckle down and do.
Yeah,
I can definitely. Oh, go ahead, James.
No, I was just going to say, I think, in the combination of, the importance of Eric's group is to keep you on track and keep the program organized so it doesn't get, kind of doesn't fall off that roadmap. You don't get to a point of what are we doing now? How are we doing this? So that's where the importance of those weekly meetings come into play. So you can, obviously track the progress, but make sure that, you're accountable and
right.
They create that level of accountability. Okay, you guys are going to do this. We're going to follow up on this, next week or the week after, whatever time frame you set. And you just have to make sure that you get it done.
Well said. I just wanted to say from our vantage point, 6 months to a year is very common for the lower level certification. And for the higher level certifications, they really do take 2 years to achieve. Typically what we recommend is that you start at the lower level, get certified down here, and work your way up as you mature. And that process has worked really well.
Brilliant. And well, I just wanted to say, because I know that we've only got about a minute left, so if there are any further questions from anyone that's watching us live or perhaps on the recording, then do feel free to email myself. My email is on your invitation to the webinar, so that's hannah.lloyd@in-stock.com. And if you do have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help, or I can pass it over to one of the team. And so I just wanted to also say thank you to all of today's presenters. Thank you to James and Sam, and also to Kevin, and also thank you to you, Eric. You're all great as always. And thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that's been watching.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Always.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.